Hi, my name is Rainer Stropek from Software Architects, and today I want to show you a short video that demonstrates how to use the new Monaco development environment from Microsoft, an IDE built entirely in the browser. And I'm going to build a short sample based on a combination of TypeScript, of AngularJS, of one of our own OData services, which will come in an early preview in the next month. And we're going to build a sample entirely in the browser. So we are using the Monaco IDE to consume our service. So just to give you a short background, our product Time Cockpit, it is a project time tracking solution. It offers an online and an offline client. The online client, it runs in the browser. It is currently built on top of Microsoft Silverlight, but we're working on an HTML version, and the HTML version will be backed by an OData compliant feed. So this is the nice graphically user interface that maybe you're used to from Time Cockpit from the Silverlight client, but today we want to access demo data through the OData feed and do that via Monaco. So Windows Azure here. This is the Windows Azure Management Portal, and the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm not running Visual Studio and build our solution in Visual Studio. Instead, we create a Windows Azure website. So let's call it TypeScript Monaco sample and put it into North Europe. I'm sitting here in a hotel room near Cologne, so it makes sense to put this website to North Europe and create it. It will take a few moments until Windows Azure has prepared our website for us. And in order to be able to work with Monaco, we have to turn it on. It's currently in a preview. So I go to Configure. And here we enable Edit in Visual Studio Online. Hit Save. Now the system prepares my website, so I'm able to work with the Monaco preview. Let's go to the dashboard back, and in a few moments we should have a new item here. Here it is, Edit in Visual Studio Online, and click on it, and now I'm in the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment, directly in the browser in the Monaco preview. So what can I do here? First, I can, of course, create a new HTML file, which will be my starting point. Let's call it home.html. Home.html. Let's do head here, and let's do body here. As you see, it's a nice editor directly built within the browser. We can also do a split view here, so we can open two files at the same time. We can open a console window here where we have multiple commands. We will need that in a second, but currently just try or to show you what this thing is able to do. Hello world. It has an autosave. I don't have to hit any kind of save button or something like this. Remember the home HTML here. So what I can do is I can click here, open the output window, and here I have a nice link. Open it. Doesn't do anything, but if I switch to hello.html, home.html, I'm going to see my hello world. So I am in the browser and I will stay in the browser, and now we can start developing without leaving the browser anymore. Next thing, I would like to use TypeScript together with my HTML file to get rich type checking and IntelliSense and things like that. So what I will do, I'll create a new file. Let's call it home.ts, ts like TypeScript, and here we are, and we can just try something and say class person, something like this, and say first name is a string. Looks good. The first problem we hit here is we have to compile this TypeScript into JavaScript. How can we do that without leaving the browser? Well, it turns out that we can use the console, the command window here, because in the command window we have the Node package manager and we have NuGet. In this case, I'm using npm and Node.js because the TypeScript compiler is written in JavaScript and it's available as an npm package. So what we can do is we can say npm install TypeScript. So now we install TypeScript through the console running in the browser directly into our Windows Azure website. You see here the node_modules directory, and the system now gets the TypeScript into our Windows Azure website. Now we can say tsc like TypeScript compiler. And now I can say tsc home.ts and compile directly in the browser my TypeScript file into a JavaScript file. In a moment, you will see a JavaScript file appear here. You see, this is the compiled version on the left-hand side for my TypeScript class on the right-hand side. So everything's fine. Now we can compile TypeScript. So I can here in the header, I can add a script tag. You see, the nice thing here is that I get IntelliSense and I can say please include home.js, and now I have combined my home.html with my home.ts on the right. But of course this home.ts doesn't make much sense. What I want to do in reality, I want to write some AngularJS code to have a nice separation between the view on the left hand side, the HTML file, and the logic on the right hand side. So let's get rid of this. Of course, I want to use the possibilities of TypeScript to its full possibility extent. So I need the type definition for Angular and jQuery. The question is, how do I get that? Well, the answer is again our console. What we can do is we can use again npm to install the TypeScript definition module. TypeScript definition enables me to get the type definitions from the definitely typed project. Just in case you're not familiar with it, while it's fetching the data, definitely typed. It's a project hosted on GitHub, and it contains TypeScript definition, ts.d.ts files for a lot of projects. And here we have, for instance, our jQuery. So this is what we are going to use, but we can, you see, directly get all this metadata inside our Monaco user interface. So we have to be patient for a few more moments. As I mentioned before, I sit here in a hotel room and the internet is not that good, so we have to be patient. Going to take a few more moments, and here we are. And now I can say tsd query. Let's start with jQuery. Do we have jQuery available? Yes, we have. So let's do an install. What we now get, we get here a new directory in a moment. Here we are, typings, and you see typings jQuery, and here we have the type definition for jQuery. Do the same with Angular. Now I install the type definition for Angular. Here we are, we have the type definition for Angular directly fetched in our browser. Now I can go to home.ts and I add a reference to jQuery and to Angular. So I type ref, hit Control plus space, and you see what I can, no, work, it has to work. Reference, here it is, and in the path again, Control plus spacebar, it shows me all the files which are in my Windows Azure website, and I just have to select my jQuery.d.ts and I have my reference set up here in my TypeScript file. I can do the same, works immediately, and get my AngularJS. So now I can, for instance, say Angular dot, and what you see here is IntelliSense in my Monaco browser based on TypeScript type definition. I have type safe access to AngularJS, and I have IntelliSense and all the things that I'm used to. To be honest, most of the time I write C# code. I'm a typical C# developer, so I'm used to this experience, and yeah, I want this experience, and therefore I really like TypeScript. So let's start by setting up our application. The first thing is I want to enable the user to enter his user and password, and therefore we define a class. Let's call this class OData TypeScript demo controller. We build an MVC-based application, and this is our controller. And here we have a constructor. You see, TypeScript is helping me again, and we are getting our scope from Angular. Let's add the constructor code. And just to show that it works, we say $scope dot greeting hello world, just to make sure that everything is fine. And here we can say greeting. Of course, this will not already work because Angular doesn't know about our controller, so we have to register our controller, and there we benefit from the type information from Angular .d.ts. So we say angular.module. Let's give our module a name. That's my module, or that's the OData TypeScript demo module, more descriptive name. We don't have any requires here, and define our controller and call it OData TypeScript demo controller, and give it the constructor function, and that's our OData TypeScript demo controller. And that's it. So that's the name of the class down here, and that's the name of the controller. Maybe I change that a little bit and do something like this to make it easier for you to understand the difference between this descriptive name and this name of the constructor function, meaning the class. So now we can take this controller name, go to our HTML file, and say ng-app, ng-controller, and this is the descriptive name of the controller. So if we refresh our application, it should be possible to see the hello world greeting through a data binding expression set up here using AngularJS and TypeScript. So before we can run it, we of course have to compile our TypeScript again. I think I have it still here. Yes, run the compiler, refresh the JS file. Yeah, and it will not work immediately because I need jQuery and AngularJS here. And let's pick it up from Google. So I use Google's CDN here to add this one, and also add the AngularJS stuff. Here it is. Just copy it. Okay. That's it. Let's go and try it. Refresh it, and it still says greeting. What did I do wrong? Let me see. Did something wrong here. Yeah, this was my mistake. I didn't enter the name of the application here, and just to prove the point, I run the debugger here. I have my sources, and you see I have my home.js. I can even set a breakpoint here. Let's refresh this. And you see, we are here in our controller file. Everything is fine. We could even compile our TypeScript code so that we get a map file. In that way, we would have source level debugging in Chrome here using TypeScript code down here, setting breakpoint in the TypeScript code. But this is a different story. That's not something for today. Now let's get back to our example and do a little bit bit more interesting things. So first one, let's build a very, very simple HTML. I know it's not production level code what I'm going to write here, but that's fine. I'm just trying to prove the point. Let's make a div, username, and make it input type text, and use an ng modal to bind here. Let's call this the username property. And the next one is the password, and again use an input type password and bind it again, ng modal equals password. And finally we need a button with ng minus click, for instance, and do login, something like this, and let's call it login. Yeah, sounds good. Now let's set up the scope here. So we say username initially is empty, and scope.password initially is also empty. Let's beautify this a little bit. And the login method is a lambda method here, and in this method we are going to do something. We are going to fire up a method in the cloud that is taking our username and our password and try to fetch an OData, a JSON web token, a JWT from a service, and afterwards we can take this token to do an OData query. So for the moment we just say console.log, I'm here. Okay, again, let's try it if it works. For those of you who are not perfectly familiar with Angular, what I'm doing here is I'm setting up the scope. These are members of my scope variable here, and all these modal bindings here are two-way bindings. You see, username into our scope variable. I also place a function here in the scope so that I can use here the ng-click method, which should bring me into my method here. Let's compile it. And let's try. Refresh. Let's set a breakpoint here. A, B, hit login. You see, we are here. Data binding works perfectly. We can also check if we have everything what we need. Let's look at this here, and we see password is okay, username is okay, everything's fine, data binding is working perfectly. So this is a very simple example of data binding in AngularJS, but please notice that in this area I now have IntelliSense. So if I, for instance, say here $scope dot, I immediately get, for instance, here the username, IntelliSense, and code completion, or the password. I have the password here, or the login method. I even get, if I hover over here, I even get, no, I don't get IntelliSense here. Huh, okay. Oh, it doesn't get any it doesn't get any parameters, and therefore I don't get typing here, but I can show it to you. Here you see, if I hover over the log method here, or if I hover over the module method here, I get additional information about the methods, and that's possible because TypeScript has a lot of type information, and it can present this type information to me, so that makes life a lot easier. So in our case, we want to use jQuery to do a web request, and I'm going to show you which web request I want to do. I want to run a service in the cloud. It's an early prototype of the OData provider for Time Cockpit, so we can do an AJAX request. Do you notice that we get IntelliSense for jQuery here directly in the browser, in the Monaco browser? I really love this. So the first one for the AJAX request is the URI. So I paste this one in, and the endpoint for getting a token is /token. And the next one here are the jQuery Ajax settings. I don't know the jQuery Ajax setting by heart, so what I can do is I open up the square brackets. Let me quickly fix that, and now I hit Control plus space, and I, for instance, oh yeah, here are the headers. You see, I get IntelliSense directly in the browser. Let's make it here, and headers. Which header would be a good idea? So if I hit Control plus space, and I start to type, no, author, oh, unfortunately not, doesn't work here. So authorization, and here we need some kind of authorization, and it turns out that we need a basic authentication to get the token. So what should I pass it here? In fact, here I should pass user and password, but we need to base 64 encode this stuff. That's not a problem. Let's have a helper here, base 64 basic auth equals b to a. Raw string is $scope.username plus something like this, $scope.password. IntelliSense is extremely helpful. Now here we can say add append base 64 basic auth. That's fine. And then we have done here the result, and this result goes into a lambda expression here. And you know what? Let's save the token. The token is just a base 64 JWT token into a member variable in our scope. So let's open up the token. It's initially empty, and now we say $scope.token equals to result. And finally, we could say is logged in equals false, and here we say scope.is logged in. You see, IntelliSense it equals true, and let's just to be sure $apply to refresh all Angular bindings. So let's go back to our HTML and extend it a little bit. So what could we do? Let's do a div and say ng.show equals and bind this to the is logged in. So the following, the content of this div should only be visible if is logged in is true. And is logged in is true once the authentication request was successfully completed. So span you are logged in, your token is, and do a binding here. The binding is token. This one, this token, references this scope.token on the right hand side. Looks good, should work. So let's compile our TypeScript. It's quickly done. Remember, we are still in the browser, we have not started Visual Studio, but still we can do a lot of interesting stuff here. Compiling was correct, so what I'm going to try here is I hit F5, refresh this, and remove the breakpoint here. Okay, we don't have any content here. I copied out here the test user, the user, it's a development database that I use here, therefore it's just the trash mail address, and enter the password. I think I just did a typo here, hit login, and let's see. Wow, it worked. So let's take a look at the network here, and you see we requested the token, we sent in the headers. Here you see the basic authentication header is the base 64 encoded user and password combination, and the response is the token. This is our token, and now we are going to use this token to query the time-clock-bit database. So let's get back to our development environment, and the next thing is we want to set up a very simple table, for instance. Very simple. I know it's not production level HTML. I'm not caring about things like CSS and so on. You have to do that yourself. I'm just trying to show you how this can work in the Monaco project and prove the point and demonstrate a little bit of Angular here. So please don't rate my HTML here in this sample very high. It's just for demo purposes. I use the ng repeat here, the Angular possibility to repeat, and how can we call it? Timesheet in timesheets. Okay, and we need something like this, and say we have the timesheet dot, and it turns out that in the time cockpit database, every timesheet has a column which is called app begin time. And there is also a second column which is called app end time. It's just the names of the columns in the time cockpit data model. You have to know that time cockpit is very, very highly customizable. So you can change the data structures, you can add your own tables and relations and validation rules and all this stuff. And this app just defines this is an application specific column which you cannot drop. You can add your own columns, and in this case you would say here USR, like user specific columns, but in this case we use a predefined column, and the last one is the description here. Looks good. Now we have to do the work on the right hand side. When do we want to load this stuff? Maybe we add oops, I just recognized that I did something wrong. I want to have this inside our div, so sorry for mixing that up. So here I want to have a button. Again, let's do the ng click, and let's call this load timesheets. Again, it's a method bound to the scope, and load timesheets. Okay, we can go here and define the $scope.load timesheets method. Again, it's a lambda. And what do we want to do in this thing? Yeah, we take again an Ajax request. Just copy it from above. I'm a lazy programmer, I have to admit. Okay, and in this case we say, please go to the OData endpoint and query a table which is called app timesheet. This URI is really an entire query language, so if you're not familiar with OData, I encourage you to check out www.odata.org. OData is a great standard. It's a kind of tabular data stream for the cloud. And what OData is able to do for you, you could do things like $filter equals to and do some filtering here, or we could say $top. Just give me the first 10 timesheets. We could say $expand to do some joining between the tables, and so on and so on. So OData is really, really powerful, and we built a OData compliant endpoint here. So we can just fire up, if we could just fire queries, time cockpit queries, including customizations using this functionality. But change a bit, because now we are going to use a token, and therefore we're not going to pass basic here, because we don't use basic authentication in this case. We use a bearer token, and the token we find in $scope.token. Remember, here we fetch the token with the first request, and we store it in the scope in the variable called token, and here we can use this token for the bearer authorization header here. And when we have it, the OData request will contain one property which is called value, and therefore we can say $scope.timesheets equals to result.value. Value will be an array of JSON objects. So this timesheets thing is an array of objects. Here you see again the array with the timesheet in expression with the ng repeat, and that should be enough to do the entire data binding magic for us. Well, hopefully. Just to make sure that everything's worked fine, I say $scope.$apply just to make sure that data binding immediately works. And well, tried. Compile it. Get a compiler error? No, we don't get a compiler error. Go into this thing here and run it. Okay, let's log in again. This is our user. This is our password. Hit login. See, you see, the token is fetched from the system. Yeah, it worked. By the way, notice that we get an option query here. We do course in this case because our Windows Azure website runs under this URI and we are accessing a different host. Our time cockpit OData feed is supporting course. So this is the reason why we can do that. And now we hit load timesheets and well, let's take a look what happens. Here we see the get and you see, woohoo, not very beautiful, I admit, but we have the table, we have the starting date time, we have the end date time, and we have the description. And if you take a look, exactly 10 items, because I've specified, you see it down here, $top equals 10, so we have a nice query. And just to make sure you fully understand the OData stuff here, we could, for instance, say something like this. We could say, hey, we're only interested in timesheets where the filter equals app description equals to ASDF. Something like this. Go to the console, compile the TypeScript file, and let's run it again. User, password, login, here's our token, the timesheets, and you see we only get the ASDF anymore. So we really did a query, and this query went through our service layer, through our OData layer, through our validation rules, our permission system, directly to the database. Somewhere in the background it's running in Windows Azure, and it gives me back the data, and I can do whatever I want to do. I can show it to you. You see, you get the entire data structure, and you can now use your perfect HTML skills and nice UI libraries, like for instance Teleri Kendo or something like this, to present this data, to let this data be edited in your custom application or whatever you want to do with your timesheet data. So this is what I wanted to show you. Just to summarize the most important points, we did everything from scratch in a Windows Azure website. Please don't forget to click on Configure to enable editing your Windows Azure website in Visual Studio Online. Then we switched to Visual Studio Online by using on the dashboard this link, Edit in Visual Studio Online. And then we were here, and here you have seen how we use the console to install TypeScript, the TypeScript compiler with NPM. You have seen how we used NPM to install TypeScript definitions. Remember the typings folder here. And you have seen the look and feel of Monaco. You have seen IntelliSense when working with Angular. You have seen IntelliSense when entering the HTML. You have seen me compiling TypeScript code and trying it, debugging it directly here in the Chrome browser. I hope you enjoyed this sample. I also hope, of course, that you maybe got interested in what this time cockpit thing is. I encourage you to give it a try, and I hope to see you soon in a different video. Thank you and good night. Bye.